You're listening to Codepunk with Bill Ahern and Michael Zuhl, a podcast about the intersection between programming, technology, and the digital lifestyle.
Good evening, Michael. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay, man. It's been a difficult weekend. So as everybody knows, I have twins, and this was the weekend that we converted the twins from cribs into toddler beds. So they are, running wild. And so if you hear, kids start banging or screaming in the background, I apologize. It's from them. Or if you hear my wife's voice over the intercom hollering at the kids to go sit down or go lay down, that's the reason why. So we started Friday, and it hasn't been too bad, actually. But it takes about an hour for them to actually get tired and go to sleep. And of course, my daughter, the whole reason we did it is because my daughter started climbing over into my son's crib and going to sleep there, which is fine, except that my worry is that she'll climb over the crib and land on the floor if she comes, towards the doorway. And
right.
And so we were like, okay, well, Heather decided she'd do the conversion. So we did the conversion, and of course Skylar's still sleeping in my son's bed. But
she managed to get out of the toddler crib and into your son's crib?
Well, no, it's a bed now. So it's a toddler bed. So it gives them like the railing and everything. But basically they sleep, and if they get up to leave, they can get up to leave.
Okay, they've advanced to the next level.
Yes, and it's scary for us because it's like, okay, well, how's this actually going to work, and how many times do we have to holler at them before they realize they actually have to go to sleep? I got the whole room on lockdown. I got
sounds like it monitors and shit.
Monitors everywhere, and I got the dresser drilled into the wall. But we wanted to get I wanted to get this recording out, so I couldn't wait any longer. I figured, well, man, maybe I'll get lucky and they'll only scream a little bit. Well, other than that, it's been a pretty fun weekend, and this is an exciting topic that we're going to talk about tonight. And I've done some experimentation with it, so I'm raring to go.
Yeah. So we're going to be discussing bots, and I've been really on the bot train since Microsoft announced the availability, kind of opening up their bot framework and talking about all the stuff they're going to embed into Skype. I love the ideas because the main reason I switched over to the Windows Phone primarily, although I was planning to do it anyway, was Cortana, because I sort of feel like, and this is how Microsoft positioned it anyway in terms of when they made their announcement about bots and their frameworks, is that I think a lot of these personal assistants are going to become kind of central to the way that we use computing. And you hear a lot of hype about that, but what I mean by that is I have now my Xbox, my computer, and my phone all respond to Cortana. That's basically my personal assistant of choice. So I decided to try and unify all the devices that I use in that way. So the cool thing that they're going to do, and this is just sort of like a little aside because it does get annoying, is if I'm sitting down and I've got my Surface tablet open and I'm watching TV and you're always futzing with your phone, if I make a command to Cortana, they all kind of light up. And Microsoft has announced that one of the things they're going to do is they're going to make it so that the version that was most recently interacted with, whatever device, that will be the one that responds. So they all kind of communicate with each other and then like hand off the official, okay, who's actually going to respond to this? So that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely a needed enhancement. I hope they haven't yet completely tackled it on Skype as far as the last one you sent a message to, it'll respond to that one. So hopefully they get Cortana working a little better. I'm a little disappointed. My Xbox still responds to Xbox. I haven't switched it over to Cortana, and I feel like the Kinect might be going in it because it just can't hear me anymore, and it can't really interpret what I'm saying. And with the Xbox One kind of moving away from being Kinect centric, Amazon kind of did away with their voice interactions with it. So you still have to end up using a remote with some of the app updates. So that's been a disappointment. Cortana as a whole, I found to be much more responsive. And it was funny because I actually have the Amazon Echo. I have the Echo and I have the Echo Dot. I actually got the Echo Dot and I liked it enough for what it was doing. I wanted to hook up a Bluetooth speaker to it, and really good Bluetooth speakers end up being a lot more expensive than just going and getting the regular Echo. So I have the regular Echo with the speaker in my kitchen, and then I have the Echo Dot in the living room. And it's funny because I asked it a question the other day, and it didn't have the answer, but it sent me the Bing link to it. So it's
Oh, that's funny.
So they're actually using, behind the scenes, it looks like Amazon's using Bing's services for a lot of Alexa's initial AI outside of what they're doing.
That's really interesting.
But with bots, I'm kind of curious because I'm excited about bots too, and I have been for a while, and I was excited about the bot announcement. But honestly, I've yet to find a bot that's at all useful. The most useful bot that I've found has been the UPS bot. So you can so you can send it the tracking number and it sends you a response. But the problem is, of course, you have to have the tracking number. In order to get the tracking number, I go into my email to get the tracking number. Chances are I could just click on a link and still get the exact same information that comes from the bot itself. So the UPS bot is great and it does everything useful, but I can get that information elsewhere. And a lot of the other bots have been novelty items. So I don't know where we're at in the hype cycle. I understand that as far as abilities and AI and useful apps out there, and even with Alexa, if you look at the Alexa skills, there's a limit on the actual usefulness of some of those things. So I think that this is an area where the technology to build them has come out in advance of some of the machine learning and some of the more advanced ways to actually use these bots in a successful way.
Yeah, platforms like this always require that killer app to help people really understand, oh, that's what it's for. But I think for the sake of context, we should actually explain, although I'm sure anybody who's listening to our podcast up to this point would know what a bot is, but we should probably even give a proper definition of a bot, right?
Sure.
So do you want to take this one? Or I know you just built one and I've been dabbling with it, but you went and built one and our publishing.
Give me your high level overview.
The high-level overview of a bot is something that's a little more interactive than just, say, a web search. So you can speak to it. First of all, most bots, you can speak to them, but some of them also kind of function in a chat application style interface. And it will be a series of interlinked contextual conversation that you can get information from the bot. And then as you are asking information, because it isn't just a one-on-one, that's the thing that's exciting about bots, is you can actually give them verbal or, a written command, and they can, depending on what it is and who wrote it, can go and do things for you. So that's really the power of it, because otherwise you're just talking about a glorified web search. So you have these functions that can go out and do things for you. It can order tickets. It can order pizza, which is the very popular example that people build when they're demoing this stuff. Uber has they've hooked into Cortana, so it's not really Uber's bot, but it is the same functionality. They just wired into Cortana as opposed to building their own app. I can I can long press the mic button and give Cortana on my phone, I have a Windows phone, a verbal command to get me an Uber to pick me up where I'm at and send me home. I can say, Cortana, I want an Uber ride home. And from that context, she'll know that I want to ride home means, send an Uber to my spot and then just wire it directly to my house if I have that information plugged into Cortana, which I do. And through a simple verbal command, I don't have to do any typing or anything like that, and Uber will show up. I've used it, and it's actually really cool.
Well, if we look at some of the most popular and the most successful apps that are on a cell phone, first of all, the killer app on the cell phone, on the normal cell phone, was text messaging. And then we moved on to smartphones and we got apps, but then you look at some of the killer apps on the smartphone and it's still messaging. So you have things like Skype, you have, like 1 billion users on WhatsApp. You have now encrypted apps like we talked about before, like Signal and Wicker. You have Facebook Messenger, which has been gaining enough in popularity that they split it off as a separate app. You have Snapchat, you have Twitter direct messages. There's 1,000,001 ways to communicate with somebody that doesn't actually require a post on a social network. And because these are smaller devices, you don't have a giant website clogging up your view. And it turns out that more and more people are using cell phones in a way that expands communication beyond the norms of cell phones or message boards. And even from a business perspective, things like Microsoft Teams, things like Slack, there's a lot of different services out there for communication. And so they look at these communication things and they said, okay, well, what's the next UI? Is it the conversation UI? what can we add to conversations to make them richer? So, I mean, you'll see a lot of apps that have filters for messaging. Instagram has, filters for photos. Snapchat has filters. iMessages on the iPhone has like bubbles and some other weird stuff that's on there. We have emojis. So we have all these ways to richly enhance the conversation, and apps are kind of the next level. And where I started to realize this was when I wanted to see if a beer store was open, because I happened to be eating right next door in a diner, and I wasn't sure whether they were open at the time or if they had this particular beer that I was looking for. So I said, you know what? Let me see if they have Facebook Messenger. And I pulled up Facebook Messenger, and this is the first time that I noticed that it actually tells you how long it takes the business to get back to you if you send them a message. And it was like, usually gets back to you in 30 minutes. So I said, well, I'm going to be here at this diner for about an hour. Let me send them a message. About 15 minutes later, I got a response to it. And I thought to myself, I said, wow. I said, you know what? I don't use Facebook for an awful lot of personal stuff, but to be able to look up a business and send them a quick message without having to call them, without them knowing any of my personal information other than my name, and to get a response back that quickly, to me was amazing. And I did it again with the chiropractor that I'd gone to. And I said, there might be something to this. So if you add that added layer of here's your business, but also here's your bot to go along with it, so that you don't have to service all those things, and you could do things with those bots, it makes it incredibly interesting. And it was in the same year that Microsoft announced the bot framework. Of course, Facebook had their developer conference where they mentioned adding bots to Messenger. So I think that's a very, very powerful thing. And Microsoft, this is the new Microsoft, they kind of upped the ante because they basically built a framework that has connectors to interface with all of these services. At least, maybe not, I think it does Slack, it does SMS, it does web chat, it does Facebook Messenger, it does Twilio, it does Skype. So there's a ton of connectors that you can actually work with. So it's not just you're publishing a bot to Microsoft's network and it's only available in Skype. You can make it available all over the place. And that's powerful.
And it is very powerful. Not to mention they've also added hooks for their voice API. So all their other backend technologies, the Bing API. So you can not only have access to all of these other third-party services, but you can wire up the stuff that Microsoft themselves are using. Like I said, Cortana, if you want to have, that stuff in there. If you just want to have some sort of voice translation stuff in there, that's in there. So, and they've made that freely available, right? You don't have to pay for that. The APIs are free.
Yeah, everything that I've seen. Yeah, and then you start to think, you're like, okay, where does Microsoft making all their money? Well, Microsoft basically created a way for you to develop bots so that they could become the preferred platform for you to develop on. Right now, you can write your code in C# or you can write your code in JavaScript using Node. But it's actually, if you look at the API under the hood, it's a bunch of REST calls that goes back to Microsoft's website. So in reality, you could build a front end to any of these simply by using your library of choice and interacting with the REST calls. Some of the richer elements would require a little more work, but really it's not even tied down to Microsoft's written technologies. But they've offered you this framework. They've offered you these languages and these libraries for you to choose from. And then on top of that, they have these integrated services. So you're kind of like, well, why would I, what does Microsoft get out of it? Well, Microsoft is trying to get you to, they've made it so simple for you to deploy your stuff to Azure. They basically want to make their money off of the cloud again. So it's like, here's this bot thing you can do. Oh, and if you want to deploy it, here's an easy way to deploy it to Azure, where we handle all of the back-end stuff too. And your bot's just kind of sitting there. And then you can connect it to all these services. And you need some statistics on that. We'll give you some statistics on that too. Oh, and it's a lot easier to use a bot if you're using a natural language processor. Here's Lewis. Why don't you plug into that and see how well that works for you? So they're using it as leverage for their cloud services, which is a fantastic, way to do business. So basically,
it's brilliant, and that's even why they've given away a version of Visual Studio in 2017 with their community version, which I've actually switched to for home development because it is so feature complete. Just in terms of what I, as an individual developer, I'm not connected to any team here at home. It's just me by myself. That version of Visual Studio is as powerful as you expect. It's not a GIMP version. They have obviously some features that aren't in there, but it's all the team focused stuff. And to your point, they've made that available because they want developers developing in their development environment, building the stuff that they've made for free, bots and all the APIs. Like you said, it's just a series of APIs. They've just said, here, use them at your will. So they can kind of get everybody developing with their tools into the cloud, which is a really, really smart move.
Yeah, and it's not hard to build a bot. You mentioned earlier that I've been experimenting with one, and I've put this code up on GitHub. So github.com/codepunk-io, I think, is what we put it under. And you could fork it, you could play with it, whatever. Hopefully, by the time this podcast actually airs, I'll have deployed it to Azure. I'm in the process of doing it now, and I'll have it available on Skype, and I'll be tweaking it a little bit as we kind of go along. And it is drop dead simple. And the bot that I put together is basically parsing our RSS feed for codepunk.io, and then it's spitting out stuff. You can ask, what was the last post? What was the latest, podcast episode? And so it parses out that information. And this one's written, I wrote this in JavaScript using Node just because it was a quick way to prototype. Obviously with C#, there's a lot of typing in it. Now I did write this in TypeScript, not JavaScript proper. So I'm written in TypeScript, compiles to JavaScript. So I do get some of the typing, but it's not as strict as the C# typing. If you look at some of the example C# code, and it's just phenomenally easy. I mean, if you follow the examples that they give you online, they basically start you off with a console connector just so that you run through the console app. And anytime it'll deliver back to you the messages you expect. And anytime you have some rich content, it'll deliver you to JSON for that rich content. So you still see it, even if you can't see the actual rich content types that are being sent back to you. And then when you've done all that and you're done playing around with the console connector, you can switch to basically a chat connector. And this is using their universal bot because they have their whole bot builder framework. And if you plug in a chat connector, you can download their emulator because, of course, there's Microsoft building an emulator for the thing. And you just
naturally
and they use Restify, which is a open source NPM module that utilizes a stripped down version of Express, which is the most popular framework for Node.js. Uses a stripped down version that only handles REST calls, and it basically allows you to create easy REST backend, easy REST web API. So Microsoft utilizes that when you throw together your chat connector, and you just download your emulator, you plug the URL in there, and then you start talking to it. And I mean, it works phenomenally well. And I couldn't imagine it being any easier. It is drop dead simple. And the first thing you can do is obviously you can create dialogues with it, your initial dialogues and a couple of other dialogues. And it uses a waterfall kind of methodology where you pass. So if you do a bot.dialog, you can pass in a collection, basically an array of functions. And what it does is it'll take the result of the first function and pass it to the second function. So as you kind of go through your conversation based on a person's individual response, you can then pick up that information in the next function and decide what to do with it. You can either store that information in session, you can end the dialogue, you can give them another prompt, or you can push them to another dialogue so that you can just continue this conversation. And it really doesn't get much easier than that. I started off basically testing with some of those dialogues, and then you kind of move into to other areas. And the way we built this one here is we used Intents, INTENTS, not intense as an intensity, but as in your intent. And using the intent dialogues, it actually uses regular expressions. So it tries to match the information that somebody is typing in, and based on that match, it'll then run whichever function is inside of the matches. And so that works surprisingly well, and that works really easy too. And if you decide to use Lewis, that basically looks at a collection of data, whether it's a JSON file or a JSON object, and based on the information, there's almost no code to it. Based on the stuff that the person types in, it'll look at that collection and decide which one it needs to prompt, and send back to you. And all you do is format the message itself. I mean, incredibly simple. The beauty of it is kind of the rich cards that they use. These are like audio cards, thumbnail cards, hero cards. And this is a way to kind of build an advanced message and send it back to the user. And so I did.
What's a hero card?
It's like a giant image. So I'm not quite.
Oh, those things. Yeah. Okay. It's like a giant splash image.
Right.
Thing.
So there's a bit of a difference between the thumbnail card and the hero card. So we're using the thumbnail card and the audio card. So if you ask what the latest podcast episode is, it doesn't just return the information, but it'll actually return to you an audio card, and you can actually play the audio right there inside of the Skype window. or at least inside of the emulator. I'm sure it works within the Skype window as well, which I thought was pretty neat. And it'll do it for a video card as well. And then for the thumbnail card, like if you ask what the latest post is on codepunk.io, it'll then return the last blog post that we did that's not a podcast episode, and it'll include the image from that as kind of the thumbnail card. Really, really easy. And what I basically learned from this is that it's very easy to create a bot, but it's very hard to create a meaningful bot, which kind of takes us back to our conversation of hype versus what can you actually do with it. You can build a bot, but if you want to build one that actually does something interesting for people, that's when you kind of got to get into, how do I do better when it comes to natural language processing? What sort of AI services should I or do I have to connect to? And what kind of value can I add to a conversation beyond just, the normal stuff that we've been doing or tiny games or, tracking and things like that.
One of the things I'm surprised that I don't see a lot of. Let me rewind a little bit here. I'm surprised because, on a lot of sites when you're going somewhere, particularly if there's going to be a lot of information, like if you're taking a vacation somewhere or something like that, there's always, you'll get the little chat window, and normally there'll be actually a live person there. There's a lot of services that do it. And the place I worked before I set up there, you hook into just a little chat thing. It'll ping whoever's sitting on the desk waiting for somebody to come that they can offer their help to. So you have this like human being who's waiting to chat with somebody who's coming to the site. And it seems to me that there's probably going to be a lot of repetitive questions that are all similar, right? Like a FAQ, frequently asked questions. And one of the things that is interesting to me is a bot would fill that need perfectly. My wife,
you know what, Bill, you keep throwing up the softballs and I'll keep knocking them down, because Microsoft actually does have that service. So Microsoft, if you go to the bot framework, they actually do have an easy way to create a Q&A bot where you basically just feed the frequently asked questions into it, and it creates the bot for you. And you don't have to do any code at all. You're using their backend Azure services. You're feeding in your data, and by default, Q&A bot I think is turned on for web chat. Because if you create a bot and you publish it to the bot framework, by default it's turned on for Skype and for the web chat, and then you have to add the other services. So this is something that they actually do have, and they haven't promoted it too much, but it is a very fast and easy, Azure centric service to get that kind of Q&A thing going, so that you don't have to use a real live person. Now you still have to feed it all of the frequently asked questions, so there's no real tailoring your responses based on the intricacies of what the person has answered, but they do have that ability now.
Right. If you have, like I said, if you have some sort of like frequently asked questions, you at least have some sort of seed data to kind of put in there to get it started, and maybe through heuristics or something, it could get better. But it's funny because my wife works, the job that she has requires her answering a lot of the same questions over. She's like a talent agent. Well, not like, that's what she does. So, and a lot of the actors and the talent and stuff will reach out to her with the same questions. But even less than a generic level, there could be it just seems to me like there's, when you really, or at least when I really started to think about it, a lot of ideas started to coming to me like, oh, wow. So if you have, say, for example, you're the talent agent and you've got all your talent, and they're going to be bombarding you all day with the same questions over and over, right? You've got a whole, they have an Excel file, my understanding is, which always blows my mind. But so basically, but you've got some sort of data for each talent, what their schedule is for, say, the week or the month. And that to me seems like data that you could feed into a chat bot.
Absolutely.
And then this way, however, you'd have to wire it up. I'm just talking really high level, but if the artist wants to reach out to you, this could function through SMS. You could say SMS, and a certain phone number can then be associated with, okay, chatbot kick in. This is a phone number. Look for this list of questions. What time is my interview today, or what time is my call today? Whatever it is, and then just have the SMS automatically pump out that answer, because my wife, gets very frustrated that she has to constantly tell people the same things. It's this time. Check your schedule. Stuff like stuff like that. But that's the thing, right? And I explained this to her. She understands it, of course, but it's still annoying. Is that sometimes people just, they can check, they can pull out their phone, they can look at their calendar, but sometimes people just want a little bit of engagement, like reassurance from some other entity. Like, what time is that thing again? I do it to my wife all the time. I ask questions that I sort of already know the answer to. Right. I'm just looking for some sort of affirmation. And it seems to me that to automate that process with a bot would be genius. But I don't see anybody. I'm sure there's somebody doing it somewhere. People are using bots, but it just, it hasn't, it hasn't hit critical mass yet. And it seems to me that purposes like that, while not very sexy or glamorous, that to me is like the killer app. Just reduction of like redundant tasks throughout the day.
Yeah, the idea of a personal assistant has been around for a while now, and people have really tried to shoehorn this whole Iron Man Jarvis idea, or we've seen it with Siri, we've seen it with Cortana. They're trying to create these personal assistants that work well on your phone. And although Cortana I think does a good job, Siri doesn't do as great a job as one would expect. There's fundamentally, they're going to expand similar to how Alexa is trying to expand, where it's not necessarily the core technology, but it's the added skills. And you're basically going to be able to train your Cortana by saying, here are all these other services that I also want to connect to. And I want to install these bots so that they work well, within the context of me, holding down the home button and something like that kind of advanced personal assistant for these types of bots, whether it's, what's your schedule, or, what the weather is, or, some of those interactions with people like your wife. I think it could run a lot smoother. I don't know whether I'm sure that the natural language processing is there. I don't know if there's enough people who know enough about how to kind of train and work with that natural language processing to make anything that's worthwhile just yet. I think the AI portion of bots is just such a novel idea and so new that the people building the bots on the front end just are slightly disconnected from kind of those services on the back end right now.
Yeah, it's suffering the perils of nascent technology, right? It's so new. People are kind of like, well, what? You're right. Like, you're just kind of like shrugging, like, okay, well, now what? I got this thing. Because to me, it seems like most of the interactions, we have Cortana on the Xbox, and basically, and my wife knows how to use it really well. Of course, I would use it just for the sake of having it, because my whole life, this is the kind of tech I've always wanted. But, we'll basically give verbal commands. We rarely use the controller for the Xbox. When it's easier, we can just, tell Cortana to do something, but then since I don't have an Alexa, I was kind of interested because I have a couple friends that really like it, but they use it almost to the same capacity that I would use Cortana, which is like, turn this on. For them, it's like playing music in the kitchen. And, for me, it's basically like, go to this app, play this, I don't know, whatever, like go to Netflix, something like that. And I'm kind of wondering when it's going to become a bigger deal when we transition into trusting the technology enough to say, maybe you have some stored commands in there, like order pizza from Gennaro's or something, and it's going to know like whatever your favorite is. Like, again, I'm speaking high level, but when we start getting into trusting our bots to make the right decisions for financial transactions, and I feel like that's going to be when we actually get there and people trust it enough. And this, I feel, is no different than when people actually started buying things on the web.
Right.
Because remember, there was a lot of like around 2000, 1999, there was a lot of reluctance. People were like, ooh, I don't think I'm going to be buying stuff on the web. I don't just want to put my credit card number on a website. That's crazy. Right. And that's how people reacted to it. It was like almost, and today it's not even, it's preferred. And I wonder if it gets to that point where people are like, I'll give it a shot, and they've had the kinks worked out well enough that it does behave as expected. I think that'll be the big tipping point.
And I think it's the blending of technology. I think Microsoft did a good job by putting what they have into an entertainment / gaming device, because it makes it seem like it's a part of that kind of home environment. It doesn't make it seem odd or that it's sticking out. And then Amazon's technology, the Dot and the Echo, kind of seem like they stick out because it's just this tower or this little thing that's sitting there. But the Dot does a little bit of a better job of kind of being hidden and blending in, and it's got a minimalist design, so or minimal design, so it looks pretty good in the corner. And there are certain aspects of it you like and you don't like. I mean, is it easier to just go on your phone and choose the music you want to listen to, or is it easier to speak it and have the device? Speaking to the device, the conversation UI has to be easier than me typing on my phone. And I think so many people have gotten used to quickly typing on their phone. It's become second nature, that verbalizing the appropriate commands and having the machine interpret what you're saying and translate that into the appropriate commands are a bit of a point of friction right now.
It is, especially because it's not perfect. And it kind of has to be as close to perfect as you want, because otherwise, like you said, people are like, you know what, I could just do this so much faster if I type it out. And realistically, they probably can't. You know,
Right.
I think I heard some study somewhere where they did like the process of speaking to your device versus typing a command to get, you know, that function to happen. And I believe I'm just now thinking of it. If I'd remembered before the show, I would have went and found it. But you know, the people were still faster making things happen by typing them out. Although apparently it's faster to talk, but they took into account how many times people had to repeat themselves or speak slowly, a little too slowly sometimes. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting. We're at that point now where, you know, by all rights, pragmatically, you should be able to speak to your device and it does what you want it to do. But because I still think that, and they all, you know, I've used Google, whatever Google's, whatever they're calling it now, the Google Assistant. They used to call it Google Now. But I've been using Cortana, who still has her, you know, weird flubs. Like is weird, right? So today I said, my wife sent me a picture of a dog or something. I'm talking about a dog to her, and Cortana spelled it DAWG. Like, what? I don't even spell dog like that. There's no reason for her to have thought that that's how I would have wanted to spell it. But that was the spelling she settled on. I found that to be very strange, but interesting.
That's hilarious. I will give Amazon credit. Alexa seems to do a good job of interpreting what you're trying to say and its parsing of the English language. Because I know that I was using it the other day, and just for the fun of it, I was like, you know, hey, you know, what movies, you know, are playing right now? And it actually came back with, you don't, you know, there's no movie theater within a such and such radius of you. Would you like to specify, you know, what movie theater? And so I was like, okay, well, what's playing at, you know, the Regal Cinemas? And it knew which one, that the closest Regal Cinemas was in Harrisonburg, and it started to tell me the show times and asked me if I wanted to order tickets. So I mean, it's doing a lot better with that kind of interpretation. So I'm happy about that. But it's going to take a while. And I think in the meantime, I think that's where kind of a lot of these conversation bots on the phone or in other services fit in. And if you can start building cross-platform bots that I can turn on in Skype, I can turn on in Slack, but I can also enable it as an Alexa skill, you can kind of cross-pollinate some of your, you know, personal assistant needs. And it's like everybody can basically design and develop their own personal assistant or their own piece of technology. I mean, we've worked in other industries such as the travel industry. You know, think of if we were a part of the travel industry still, what we could do as far as, you know, adding information for travelers or for travel agents or for people like that. And there's a lot, there's a lot of value, but it's just not well thought out. We're kind of, you're right, we're still on that cusp of, okay, we know we can do a lot of stuff, but how do we do stuff of value? What's the value proposition for putting this thing together?
Yeah.
But I know that I've been working on that bot, and I've been looking to get that launched just so that everybody can try it out and test. Like I said, by the time this recording airs, it should be on Azure, so it should be available. And I'll post the link to the website when it is. We're going to add an extra section to the website called Lab, just for the different projects that we're kind of playing around with and putting together. And it'll link to the GitHub stuff. So look for that. Look for that link, and that'll have the bot on there. What about you, Bill? Have you been playing with the bot framework and throwing anything together? I'm assuming you would try it out with the C# stuff, or have you worked with the JavaScript?
I initially started out with the C# stuff. Since I spend most of my days now living in a TypeScript world, I'm usually more interested in going into the JavaScript route, right. You know, like but I really don't like working within Node. So typically what I'll do is I'll write it in C#. Okay. And just kind of whenever I have it. Yeah. So, and what I'm working on right now is, and it's nothing that I would publish to, you know, publicly, because it's for private use, and does involve, I'm thinking of adding financial transactions, but we'll see, because again, it's not a technology that I'm deeply familiar with. But what I've done, and this is sort of going back to what I was saying earlier, is my wife also runs an annual festival for acrobatics. And so same thing, a lot of the same questions repeated over and over. So I'm building a bot that allows because people come from all around the country, and there's a lot of information that they want to know. Where can they stay? Where can they eat? And there's a lot of data to be culled from that. What are cheap places? What are, you know, places that have good rankings on Yelp, or, you know, so on and so forth. And so I'm building a bot to put on her site that people, instead of constantly bombarding her with emails, especially because when it gets close to the actual event, she's very, very busy, and she wants to be able to help people, but it's just, you know, there's only one of her. And I'm building a bot that will actually kind of function in that capacity to answer questions and provide the details, maps to, hotels or what have you.
I'll be interested to see how that works out. Because again, this is new to both of us as far as playing around within this framework, and it'd be cool to bounce some ideas off of each other and kind of see where we can take it, and if it really does meet the hype, and if it's worth doing, or if there's some other people's piece of technology right around the corner that'll do even better.
Yeah. That's the big question, right? Because, the thing is, because the next step would be, like I said, I'm thinking maybe involving financial transactions by if there's a way to wire into PayPal. If PayPal makes it easy, because I know they have, their APIs where you can do a bunch of stuff. If they make that connection easy, then I'll do it. If not, I'm not going to touch it yet.
Right. Well, like I said, so we will post a new page to the site for Lab that will showcase, some of the extra stuff we're working on, and the bot that I've been doing will be up there. And, we do write blog posts in addition to the podcast, and we actually do have a newsletter run through MailChimp. So if anybody wants to sign up for that, it'll give us basically I send it out twice a month. I'll probably send it out, and it'll be a summary of the stuff that we're doing and maybe some other tidbits. We're trying to find some way to make that interesting and to stay interactive. But that's all I got on bots right now. Bill, you got anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys next time.
Take care, everybody.
That's it for this episode of Codepunk. You can subscribe to this podcast on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, or listen to it on the web at codepunk.io. You can find Bill on Twitter at Norathustra and Michael on Twitter at Zool.